When you unpack your American Home machine and plug it in, you can begin to remove the threads that came when it was shipped. We're going to start by raising up this thread tree and finding the ends of the threads as they were cut from the factory. To remove your threads from the machine, open up the front door cover and raise the presser foot in the back. You can slide your stitch sample off to the side and then grasp your hand wheel and rotate it towards you until your needles are in the highest position. Now you can hold on to these threads as they come out of the machine and take your fingers behind these two looper threads and pull them towards you. You can do the same with the needle threads, first pulling them from this area underneath this tension knob and then grasping them right before they come into the needles. Now you're free to pull all the threads out to the back of the machine. In the first video, we talked about the different parts of the machine, and if you like to get familiar, you can watch that first before proceeding. I'm using 4 cones of the same color of thread that I'm placing in each one of the positions on your machine for stitching. To begin threading, you can look at this threading guide that's on the inside of the front cover and notice that your upper looper thread, or this green colored area, is where you're going to start because this is the one that needs to be threaded first. I'm going to take the end of my thread and drape it over this first threading wire. Then I'm going to hold my thread firmly and click it into place into the first guide and then bring it over to the right and put it snugly through that little tension disc. It's important to make sure that your presser foot is lifted before taking your thread and sliding it down into this tension area. Your machine, when it came, will have a little piece of paper that will tell you the factory settings for the standard 4-thread stitch. You should hold on to that and refer to it over the course of time. I'm now going to take my thread and put it into each one of these areas that has the green dot on it. You can refer to this little guide here in the front of the machine or even look at the instruction manual. Don't miss this one down here, and you'll notice that I'm just clicking them into place. Here, we're going to go underneath to lift up on this. And the next place that I'm going to go is into the eye of the upper looper. I like to cut my thread so that I've got a good clean cut end, and then I'm putting it through that eye. This is a good time to grab the tweezers that came with your machine. You'll just want to grab that end, and you can pull it towards you, making sure that it doesn't catch on anything else. The last thing I'm going to do is make sure that this thread is getting tucked behind this piece, which is the lower looper. I'm now going to take my thread and pull it towards the back of the machine. Now we're ready to thread the lower looper. In the same way as before, I'm going to find the thread end, drape it over this first wire, click it here, bring it around the tension disc, and come straight down. Now I'm looking for all the areas that have the blue dot. It might be easier at this point to open up your door on the left-hand side and swing it out of the way. I'm now going to take my thread and slide it through this opening to the other side, which makes it easier now for me to click it into this last blue guide. Now, rotating the hand wheel towards me, I'm looking for my lower looper that's tipping out on the left-hand side. Get a clean cut to your thread. take your thread and bring it through the back of the lower looper. Grab the thread end and pull all the slack out, making sure it's not getting caught on anything. Now I'm going to rotate my hand wheel towards me once again to expose the eye in the lower looper, feeding the thread back through the opening. Grab your tweezers and now feed that piece of thread right through that eye, and do the same as you did for the upper looper by pulling that thread to the back. This is a good time to check and make sure that you haven't missed any of the areas. If you have, you can simply click it into place. It looks as though I've missed this green one here, or it came out during the threading. I'm just going to drape it up over the top, so now that it's in place. Now that you've done that, that's the hardest part of threading your machine. Now we can do both of the needles. I'm going to start with my right needle. I'm going to drape my thread up over the top and clicking it into place and around the tension disc, just like we did on the loopers. I'm going to bring it down the tension disc, and looking at this little guide here on the side of the machine, I'm just going to tuck my thread into that yellow hole. I'm going to do the same thing, and it goes into the back of this portion of that thread guide. Next, you're going to take your thread and drape it over the top, and then I'm going to swing my thread over to the right. Lastly, I'm going to lift it and tuck it behind this metal plate. Notice how I use both of my hands so that I've created some tension on the thread so that it's nice and stiff. It's easier for it to go through. I'm just going to leave that thread here. I'm going to thread my left needle thread, and then I'll thread both of the needles at the same time. Drape your thread up over the threading wire, click it into place, swing it around the tension disc. This time I'm going to tuck it in the area where the red dot is, bring it up and over in the exact same place that I had before. Now I'm going to rest my thread into this area here, and it might be easier if you grab your tweezers for this portion, which is going to be tucking it on the left side of this last needle plate and bringing it straight down. Now that I have both of my threads in place, I can easily access the needles by first lowering my presser foot, and secondly by pushing on my hanging knife over to the right and swinging it up, which exposes now my needles for me. Now it's simply a matter of giving yourself a good clean cut to your thread, and then you're going to thread your needles from front to back. Your tweezers will also come in handy to grab the thread as it comes through. Notice how I'm guiding my thread so that all the threads, once the machine is fully threaded, are all straight out to the back. Now that I have all 4 of my threads, I'm going to close the door to the left. I'm going to raise my presser foot and ensure that all of my threads are going underneath the presser foot and over to the left just a bit, making sure that none of my threads are getting caught on top of the foot in any way. Now I can move my knife back down into position, close my door, and then you can grab a piece of fabric. For test sewing, I always like to have 2 layers of fabric, and I'm going to just introduce my fabric by pushing it forward while my presser foot is lowered. And then I'm just going to allow the machine to cut some fabric off. And there's your machine threaded. You'll have to do this several times in order to get more familiar with it. Some people like to cut their threads in order to change color and just tie on a new thread color, which you certainly can do, but pay close attention to the fact that sometimes thread knots can get your machine hung up in special key places, like going through the eyes of these loopers. So I feel like it's a much better job if you just thread the machine from scratch each time you go to change threads.